Once upon a time, in a small town, there was a cheerful little girl named Sara. Sara loved exploring her neighborhood and making friendship with everyone, especially the wise elders. One sunny day, Sara's mom told her about a tea party happening at Mrs. Thompson's house, the oldest lady in town. Mrs. Thompson was known for her enchanting garden and the delicious treats she baked. Excited, Sara put on her best dress and skipped over to Mrs. Thompson's house. When she arrived, she saw a beautiful table set with colorful teacups and tasty cookies. Mrs. Thompson greeted her warmly. "Hello, Sara. So glad you could join us. Please, call me Mrs. T." Sara beamed and replied, "Hello, Mrs. T. Thank you for inviting me. Your garden is so pretty." Mrs. Thompson smiled, appreciating Sara's politeness. "You're very welcome, dear. Now, would you like some tea and cookies?" Sara nodded and said, "Yes, please, Mrs. T." As Sara enjoyed the delightful treats, she noticed Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the friendly couple from next door, also at the tea party. Sara remembered her mom's advice about respecting elders and decided to address them politely. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. How are you today?" Sara asked with a big smile. Mr. Johnson chuckled. "We're just splendid, Sara. Thank you for asking." The enchanting tea party continued with laughter, stories, and delicious treats. Sara felt happy to be surrounded by such kind and wise friends. As the sun began to set, Mrs. Thompson thanked everyone for coming. Sara said, "Thank you for the wonderful tea party, Mrs. T. It was magical." Mrs. Thompson patted Sara's head and said, "You're a delightful guest, Sara. Always remember to show respect to your elders. It makes the world a happier place." Sara skipped home with a heart full of joy, knowing that using titles like Mr. and Mrs. showed respect and made her connections with elders even more magical. From that day on, Sara continued to greet her elders with courtesy, creating a town filled with kindness and warmth.